I see it's snowing outside. Welcome to spring. Campus is springtime. I hear it's going to do this and then it'll go away. Well, thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it very much. We may have a couple of other folks from the 8th District delegation join us a little bit later, but appreciate you being here and being interested and coming out on a cold Saturday morning again. And we're going to do a couple of things that are a little bit different today, just to get started. One of the people that has really made my job a lot easier in Topeka is going to take you through just a brief discussion of how you access the new programming in Topeka. And it's been a mess for us the entire session. It's been very difficult getting it up and running. And one of the issues was they shut down the old one before they got the new one up and running, and that was a major mistake. But Martha Kidd is my right arm in Topeka, and she's going to take you through this. Martha started out as a student of mine at Johnson County Community College, and she has come a long way. She's now a special assistant for me in Topeka, along with some of my interns and my regular committee secretary and regular secretary. But Martha, thanks for being here. Why don't you come up and show the folks how CLIS works? And Jim Denning, if you want, why don't you come on up here and join us?
I wanted to just make sure that everyone understood that there is a website that is available to us as constituents and citizens in Kansas. Is this on?
Should be. Is the red light on the bottom?
No, talk right into the very end of it.
There you go. Is that better? Yes. Not so good. First off, there is a handout out over here that if you want to pick one up just to take with you. I hope most of you are already familiar with this website. They did not change kslegislature.org, but they certainly changed the appearance. And I was asked by Legislative Services to please make you aware that it is a work in progress. You will look today and see, we're going to point out where the live broadcast is. That could move. It has moved already once. And so if you go back onto the website, it will be there somewhere, but you may have to look for it. They expect to have the website completed before the next session, and so we'll be able to work with it and be able to count on where stuff's at. We're just going to go over three real basic things today. The next forum will be April 30th, and we will cover a couple of other items at that time. The first thing up is the Kansas Legislative Hotline. I put that on your piece of paper, that you'll find the 1-800 number there. Please feel free to use that if you're looking for any information about a bill. They hire 3 additional people to be working the hotline to be able to provide information. We use that in the Senator's office when we're looking for information about a bill. We will call, this is through the library of the state of Kansas, and they are a wealth of information. So one of the first places, if you're looking for information about a piece of legislation, as you might call that 1-800 number. The second thing that I want to cover is the live audio broadcast. You'll find that here where it has the House and the Senate. It will only be working when they're in session, but you can click on there and then it will take you to a live feed of what's happening on the floor. Some days they're there a lot longer than others. I know that I think it was Tuesday, I was not able to be in Topeka that day, but I was logged on, I think, for most of the day between the Senate and the House. And you can hear actually what's being said, and what's happening. I've got to scroll down just a little bit to one other piece of information that I found really helpful. It's under the recent documents, and it's called the Senate and House Actions and Subjects Index Report. I'm hoping it'll load up here. Looks like this, and if you want to find a bill number, this is a great way to do it. One of the bills that Senator Owens has been working on this year is about DUI. If you'll type in DUI, you can see where that was up in the find up there. Hit enter. It'll bring you to a bill that has the word DUI in it. This is not the bill that I was necessarily looking on. You can hit enter and then it will tell you that there were no more matches. I was surprised because I was looking for a bill. What I found was that I needed to type in driving. And it took me to Senate Bill number 7, which was the one that I knew about and I was looking for. Don't be discouraged if you type in a word and you don't find what you think you're looking for. Try a different word. But this gives you some bill information that if you're looking for a number to be able to follow. Those are the 3 things that we're going to cover today. Next time I plan on looking at the calendar so that you can get an idea of what information is available on the calendar. We'll see how long it takes, and we might possibly look about how you can track a bill. Is there any questions about the 3? Yes?
I do. You mentioned listening in online. Is there some way that, I notice this particularly in the House, more so in the House than the Senate, but often it is very difficult, and I got good hearing, good acuity. It's very difficult sometimes to hear, especially, not so much the speaker or the clerk, but to hear what the legislators are saying when they stand up to speak. Some people can project their voice better than others, of course, but I heard a comment made by Speaker O'Neill, something about we need to adjust this, and I don't know if it can be adjusted or not. I don't know if I'm the only complainer about that.
I will speak to Legislative Services about that on Monday and see if they're...
volume up as high as it'll go.
Certainly.
So, just a FYI.
It may be tied into the podium. They did a lot of changes and upgrades in the House, and it may be that podium speaker or the microphone needs to be adjusted. So it might be as simple as that.
Okay.
But we'll have more
Maybe I
to check.
need to email the speaker and say, turn it up. Is he in charge?
We can ask one of our representatives if you might be able to check.
I think really what happens is, if you've been there, the microphone's real thin and it's got a really long wire. And if somebody asks you a question, the protocol is for the other legislator to come and stand right by you. So what you do, obviously, is when you want to talk to somebody, you look over at them, and the microphone's here, and we can't sometimes even hear in the House. So I don't know what the solution is, but if you got to talk like this when you want to look at somebody, it's kind of weird. It's just uncomfortable. But that's what happens when you lose the audio.
I heard someone mention that they may eventually podcast, so that if you weren't able to be logged in during the day, that you'd have an opportunity at another time. Yes, sir.
In the prior website, if I logged in, say, when the House was in session, that I was half an hour, 45 minutes late getting logged on, on the website it was very clear that told you what bill was up for discussion.
I certainly agree.
And that's not there now.
No,
and
it's
I have to
not.
scroll through the agenda and see, or the calendar, and see if I can figure out what they're talking about. But will that come eventually, or do you know?
I am hoping so. There is a discussion board. I'm not on that screen. Back on the, see if I can get there. First screen. See where it says quick links, discussion group for KS Legislature? You might try going on there and posting your request. They're allowing people to put ideas or things that they're missing, and I've seen that they respond then to the question that constituents have posted on the discussion there's still a lot to be done, I hope, to the website.
I got here a little late, so I apologize if someone's already mentioned this, but Kansas Grassroots Consulting has an app for the iPhone, which includes the journal, calendar, and live proceedings from both houses, which you can listen to live on the desk.
That's the same thing.
And who is that?
Kansas Grassroots Consulting.
Kansas Grassroots Consulting?
Yeah, it's kansasgrassroots.com, and the app is called Kansas State House. So,
Very good. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Martha. Like I said, she does a great job working over in Topeka. Now, I want to do some introductions to start with. I see Sheriff Frank Denning is here. Frank, welcome. Appreciate you being here. He's the brother of Jim Denning. Jim, you want to come up here and join us? And Meryl Denning is sitting next to Jim there. Meryl's Jim's wife, and Meryl is the Secretary of the Johnson County Republican Party. Welcome. And let's see. Greg, you want to come up? Greg Smith. We have Amanda Grosserode, who's here. 3 of our representatives from the 8th District. Is there anybody that I didn't introduce that I should have? Jason Osterhaus, you want to stand up? Welcome.
Tower Road. And then you have your wife.
Thank you, Jason.
Joan Levins back here, who is running for school board. Welcome, Joan. Patty Mack. Welcome. Anybody else? And yes, my wife Donna is here, and she is a councilwoman from the 3rd Ward of the city of Overland Park. Welcome, dear. Okay, well, what I thought we'd do today, I'm going to do a couple of little things different. I like to do them, I don't want to do the same thing every week. But what I thought we'd do is start off with having each one of the representatives talk about 5 minutes and give you some kind of an introduction as to what they want to talk about. And then I'm going to talk about some things that I brought along with me, and we'll talk about some bills and throw out some questions to you about some things that I would like to hear your responses on, and then find out what you're interested in discussing. So with that, Jim, would you like to start off?
I think what I'll talk about mostly today is some job creation bills, business-friendly bills that we've been working on. The first one is the workers' compensation bill. It's passed the House and it's in the Senate, and I'm sure it's going to come out in a favorable position. The workers' comp was put together by labor and employers, and the peanut, that's the new slang word in the legislature of the bill, is it's going to clean up a lot of old case law that creates lots of frivolous lawsuits that labor and employers realize is adding to the cost of doing business in Kansas. And then it's going to raise the limit on damages. The limit hasn't been raised in 25 or 30 years, so it was probably time to take a look at that. So that was the compromise, but it'll make doing business in Kansas less expensive. So when we're attracting new businesses in, that'll be another reason for businesses to come and create some jobs. So that was number one. Number two, we're working on the unemployment insurance. With the downturn in the economy, we've had obviously 7-8% unemployment in Kansas, and it's drained the unemployment fund. And the unemployment fund is not a taxpayer issue per se, it's an employer issue. It's all funded by employers pay about 5% of payroll taxes year over year to put some money in the fund, so when we have a downturn and folks need unemployment, that's where the money comes from. But the downturn's been so prolonged that the fund actually went to zero, and we've been borrowing between $2 and $3 million per day from the U.S. Treasury. And we obviously have no choice. So we're going to borrow about $230 million before it's over. So what we have to do is we have to replenish that fund. And again, it's not a taxpayer-funded issue, it's an employer-funded issue because we pay about 5% of payroll taxes into the fund. And what we're going to do, I think, to fund it is, and for the employers in the group this will make sense, but there's the FUTA tax, which is the federal unemployment, and then the SUTA, which is the state unemployment. And FUTA is the gateway by law where we could go and borrow from the U.S. Treasury. I think we did a little bit in 2003, but that's the gateway. And then SUTA obviously is the state tax. And historically what we do is we pay 5% until your employee earns $7,000 a year, and then we stop paying. So if you have an employee that earns $30,000 a year, we pay 5% up until the employee earns $7,000, then we stop for the year and then it starts over. What we're going to do is we're going to take it from $7,000 one year and then continue to pay until $8,000 in wages the next year, and then $9,000 in wages the next year. And I think it caps at $11,000 right now. So that's how employers are going to replenish that fund. So that, again, it's not a taxpayer issue, it's an employer issue, but it needs to get rectified because we didn't think that we were going to get charged an interest rate on our loan, but the interest rate's 4.8%, and that's an enormous interest rate when you consider the 10-year T-bill is 3.3. So we're paying an extra point, so we've got to get that darn loan paid off. So we're working on that. We have a couple of tax bills that the chambers of commerce are in love with, and we've enhanced them and done a few things. One is the promoting jobs across Kansas bill. It's the peak bill. They're going to enhance it a little bit to have what's called a deal closing fund. A lot of states are actually having monetary incentives for businesses to come in and businesses not to leave. I think they used it in Wichita to keep some aircraft industry in. So that's the peak bill. And then there's one which is a tax credit called the high performance tax credit. It's been around for a while. And with the slow economy, some companies that moved into Kansas weren't able to use their credit up. So Kansas is going to allow an extra 6 years for them to use that credit up. So those are the bills that we've got going through to help, have a better business environment and bring some jobs into Kansas. So that's what we've been working on. Most of those bills obviously came out of the tax committee.
Thanks, Jim. Amanda?
Thank you all for coming today. The things that I'd like to talk about is just simply process. We are in the last week before drop dead day, and that is Saturday. So we are going to be working this week on getting all legislation worked in the Committee of the Whole. Committee of the Whole is what is called on the House floor when all of the legislators are working on one bill. We have, I'm trying to think of what the number is, but we still have quite a few bills that are sitting there waiting for us to work. These are all bills that are from the exempt committees, because if they weren't from the exempt committees, then they had to be worked by Friday or Wednesday. So we will be working those on the House floor, and why that is going on in conference committee will be the Senate and the House working together to come to agreement on bills where there was differences. Those people who are in conference committee would be the chair, the vice chair, and the ranking minority leader ranking minority member on that committee. So you have 6 people in the conference committee, 1 from each house, that is trying to come to some kind of an agreement on a bill. Once they reach an agreement, or the conference report is submitted back to each house, and each house works on that bill and decides whether they're going to pass that, or if they're not, if they're going to send it back to the conference committee. So that is what this next week entails. So each house, I don't know, do you have a lot of bills you're still working on? Committee of the whole? Yeah, we have quite a few, actually. I was looking at the bills that were still below the line on Wednesday, and we had quite a few that we didn't reach on Wednesday that were above the line, probably half of them. So we still have quite a bit to do, and that also includes the budget. That is something that we'll be working this week, would be the fiscal year 2012 budget. So this week really is going to be one of those full weeks with probably some breaks as we wait for conference committees to come back with some decisions, and then working really quick to try to come to some conclusion on that bill. And then after that, we are on recess during April, during the rest of April until the last week, and then we'll come back for veto session, in which we will address any bills that are vetoed by the governor and or any bills that are left over that have to be reached some agreement. So that's basically what I want to update the process. A lot of people always ask me how things happen. There's a lot of confusion about the process of legislation making it through, how a bill becomes a law.
Thank you. Greg?
Thank you, Tim. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. I'm going to talk briefly about some of the bills that have been in the committees that I work on, one being the House Energy and Utilities bill. We had a very, very important bill that we were working on 2 weeks ago, plus the majority of this short week, which was the funding of the E911 system in the state of Kansas. This bill was of tremendous importance. It's been worked on 3 years running now, and there's yet to be a solution to this problem. And if we couldn't come up with some kind of solution this time, 911 would cease to be funded in the state of Kansas. So it was a very critical bill, in my opinion, that we needed to work on. The product that we got started last year. It was basically the House bill, the House version of the bill from last year. It went to the Senate. The Senate had made some changes to it before it got to our committee, and we didn't get it until late in the process. My understanding is the Senate worked on it for quite a while. Once we got it, we were concerned about some of the changes that had been made. One, there was some wording that may or may not have been the case, but there was enough of it there that the perception was monies for the E911 system may have been, there was a possible avenue where they might have been able to have been swept and used for some other purpose. And we didn't want that to happen. So that was the House position, was to make sure that those funds could not be swept and that they were dedicated funds for the E911 system. And I think we achieved that with the product that we worked on in committee. And that has now been sent back to the Senate, and there'll be a conference committee on that. And as Amanda described that process, hopefully we should have a good funding bill for quite some time now on E911 for the state of Kansas, so it'll keep everybody safe. It also addresses upgrades to the system. Many of you know that, especially if you're around teenagers at all, that they don't understand that cell phones can be used for voice communication. It's all texting. And you cannot text 911 right now. If you try to send a text to 911, it will not be received. They don't have that capability. So this bill will address that to allow them to upgrade the equipment so that they can receive texts, so that they can receive pictures or videos. Someone may be at an accident scene and they can actually send a short movie clip to the dispatch center. They could send a picture of a missing child. So there's some really neat things that can be done with E911, this enhanced system. So it was really critical that we get that funded. One of the other bills we worked on in energy and utilities was the deregulation of telecoms in the state of Kansas, which doesn't sound like a big deal. It's like, okay, yeah, so what? The last big deregulation bill that passed for telecoms in Kansas was in 1996. It hasn't really been updated since then. The purpose of this bill in deregulating the telecoms, and it only affects the big counties like Johnson County, Sedgwick County, these huge counties, the big cities, is to allow even more competition between these companies for price, which could very well drive your phone bill costs down. And so we were working on that the last 2 days, 2 weeks ago, and every day this week when we broke for lunch from the House, because we were in session all day in the House, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, for the 2 hours that we were on break for lunch, I was in the Energy and Utilities Committee in the House working on this deregulation bill, trying to get it through and trying to get it passed. And we finally got it out of committee on Wednesday at about 5 minutes before we were due back in the House to start the session again. So that'll go over to the Senate now. It'll probably be conferenced on, so we'll wait House to bring the immigration bill up for discussion. Bring it out of committee and onto the House floor so that we could at least talk about it. And that's all I would have done. My motion was simply to bring it up and see if there was a will for the House to debate this bill. My philosophy is this: I don't care where you stand on the issue of illegal immigration. I don't care which side of the issue you're on. That's your opinion and you're entitled to it. But if we don't talk about it, it's never going to get fixed. There will be no remedy for the problems that are out there. So my motion was simply that, to see if there was a will in the House to talk about the issue. The vote was 40 people to talk about it, 84 people not to talk about it. So I think it's pretty clear that the House is not willing to discuss this issue at this time. And that's fine. I can live with that decision. I did everything I could, in my view, to support the oath I took to support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the state of Kansas. And that's why I brought the bill up for discussion. Looking forward to hearing from Senator Owens and from you all. And thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Greg, and thank all of you for being here and participating. And we'll all be available to answer your questions when we get to it. Let me ask you a question first of all. Does anybody know what the mascot for the Kansas legislature is?
The Jayhawk.
Not the Jayhawk or the Wildcat or the Shockers.
Coffin?
No.
Spider?
Snail.
That's close. It's the hermit crab. Now you heard Amanda's recitation about the process. Well, this is the time when the hermit crab really gets visible. Because what we do is y'all know what a hermit crab is, right? You know, they kind of move out of a shell and into another one when they grow too big for the shell or what have you, and then something else moves into that shell. That's what's happening right now. We're seeing a lot of things that are moving in and out of shells in order for various things to happen. There are people that have very strong feelings about particular kinds of bills, and they want to get it in, and sometimes they aren't going to get it in any other way than to put it in another shell that has that's already been a filed number. But it may come out totally different than it went in. I'll give you an example. We've been getting a number of Senate bills back in the Senate from the House. They don't look anything like what they were when they went over there. And I'm sure they've got a few on their side that don't look anything like they sent to us either. So, just to give you an example, there's a strong interest on both sides of the abortion question. Every year we have this debate. The House was concerned that the Senate was not going to have any abortion bills, so they took Senate Bill 34, Senate Bill 35, and Senate Bill 36, and they gutted it. There's a thing called a gut and go. And they gutted those bills completely, except for the number. 34 was driver's licenses, habitual violators, motorized vehicles, or bicycles. 35 was attorney-client privilege and work product protection. 36 was exemption from creditors for assets held in qualified retirement plans and regular and Roth IRAs. Now they're abortion bills. So when you see this screen and you're wondering, how do you track these things? How do you find them out? You can imagine what it's like for us on a daily basis when we go to Topeka to keep track of all these things. Now this is my list here of the bills I had in my committee only. There are 80 of them. We work them, we send them over, and then the House does what they want to do with them, and then they send them back. And now we're in that time period that you heard discussed about getting into conference committees. Conference committees is where the horse trading happens. The leadership of both the House and the Senate on particular committees gets together. The chair, the vice chair, and the ranking member, who's the ranking minority member, sit down across the table from each other and they take a look at these bills that have been changed in some way or another. And it doesn't take much of a change to cause it to go to conference committee. It can be something as simple as a change in when the bill is going to go into effect. Is it going to be on publication, or is it going to be on July 1st, January 1st? Any little change will cause it to go to conference committee. Once it's in conference committee, there's a discussion that goes on about, do we want to add anything or subtract anything? Is there some item of interest of any of the members on either side of the table that they want to put in the bill? And that's what's going on. If you really want to see the nuts and bolts of how things really work toward the end, go sit in on the conference committees and listen to what they are. They're open. All the meetings are open. And, you know, if you have a particular interest, look them up and see, track them, see where they are. If you have a judiciary bill on the House or on the Senate side, it could be either a judiciary bill or a corrections and juvenile justice bill on the other side, because they have two committees for the one that I have. So you just need to kind of be aware that when they go back and forth, you're not going to have somebody in federal and state affairs meeting with people from the judiciary committee, for example. It'll be committee to committee to discuss what needs to be done. So anyway, that's process. I wanted to had an article here that actually my wife made me aware of this, but I know this will surprise some of you. This comes from the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC. They wrote an article that raises an issue that I think is important. I've been talking for the whole time I've been in the legislature about doing something like this. In fact, probably years before, because it always concerned me that we did things backwards. We always think about first the money, and then we think about everything else. Here's from the ALEC. This is what they're saying. To gain control of a state budget, the following questions should be answered. 1. What is the role of government? 2. What are the essential services the government must provide to fulfill its purpose? 3. How will we know if government is doing a good job? 4. What should all this cost? And 5. When cuts must be made, how will they be properly prioritized? I agree 100% with that list. Problem that we are facing right now in Topeka, like all the other states, is that we are in a hole financially. And you heard Jim Denning gives a good recitation on where we are financially. The problem we have is that we have forgotten that there is a role for government to play, and you have to pay for it. Taxes is not a bad word, although there are people who would say that it is. Abuse of taxes is a bad thing. Abuse of prioritization is a bad thing. But where we are right now is everything we start talking about in the legislature on both sides, everything begins with, what's the fiscal impact? How much does it cost? And leadership, particularly in the House, but leadership has said we're not going to consider anything that has a fiscal increase. Well, if you do that to start with, what you're doing with is you're starting down the list. And what we have forgotten, I think, a lot, many people have forgotten, many people never knew it, is what is the role of government? And that's one of the things I want to throw out to you as a question. Because I think you'll find that when you start asking the question about what's the role of government, you'll find it's like the lawyers' convention. You may get a different answer from everybody in the room. But it's our job as legislators to take a look at what is our role? What's our function? It is not to tear down government. We are government. And from the very beginning, from the Mayflower Compact, when those 49 people landed at Provincetown, not at Plymouth Rock, when they landed, They decided they needed to have governance, and they agreed to be governed. We cannot function without government. And government cannot totally function like everybody's business, because government has responsibility for all kinds of things that business doesn't or won't assume. So, what I'd like to do today is have a little discussion with you and with all of us. So what do you think? Going back here to the first question I asked, what is the role of government? Because we need to determine what it is before we can legitimately ascertain what it's going to cost and what we have to come up with in terms of money. If we don't do that, what we will do is we will lose very core issues in government that we need to be doing, and we won't be doing our job. We need the balance. So what I'd like to hear from you is, what's the role of the government?
Protect and defend,
Okay, protect and defend.
but that can be elaborated upon.
Okay, protect and defend in what regard? You said elaborated.
Rights, protect rights. What comes to mind is property rights, my pocketbook. It's not it shouldn't be a confiscation role.
Okay.
On the part of government. You take care of those to the ability you are able, but still a fiscal question here. Those who are unable to care for themselves, the most vulnerable. One thing that kind of screams in the back of my mind is our transportation thing. That's been so funded and overfunded, and yet it's spent in, you rob Peter to pay Paul. That is a problem. I'm getting off.
Okay, so property rights and individual rights to be protected by government, but recognizing that there are other things that people might need to pay attention to. Yes, sir.
Certainly, before you get to either property rights or anybody's pocketbook, certainly the first thing is, as they say in the U.S. Constitution, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. The first one is life. So that you start talking about things like the prison system. There are a lot of very dangerous, nasty people out there in this world that I want my family protected from. I don't want them running loose on the street. And you need to pay for buildings, you need to pay prison guards. It takes money to keep us safe. I want my streets plowed. I want them salted when they're icy, because my kids are out there driving that road and they could get killed if that doesn't happen. And that, to me, is far more important than any tax cut you could ever pass.
So you're talking basically about public safety. You're talking
Yes.
about protection of rights, and you're talking about public safety. Yes, sir.
Encourage participation from the constituency. The government needs to go out and make sure that, with, programs like this, that the people are able and wanting to participate and see, and make sure that...
Just the information, PIL.
Yeah, make sure they're being heard.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Back in the back.
I think our number one consideration is to educate our children. They are the future of our state. They are the future of our workforce. They cannot fend for themselves, and it is what we are constitutionally bound to provide.
Okay, now let's talk about where we look at these things. We've got a broad brush going here. We could talk about nationally, and military defense and that sort of thing could be, where we start with that. But education is probably more of a state obligation, would you say?
Yes.
Is that fair? You think it's local?
Should be,
You don't think it should be state?
and it certainly shouldn't be the federal government.
No, I think most people would agree with
It's
that.
not in the Constitution.
The state
Yes, ma'am.
constitution. I think that we are looking for sufficient
individual safety to provide for sufficient economic activity. That includes education to the extent it is necessary for economic activity to take place successfully, but does not include football. It does not include band necessarily. These things are for such a limited portion of the population who will go into a productive activity in these areas, that we are spending money that should be placed in reading, writing, and computational skills.
Okay.
Just would like to say, though, that it is band and football and extracurricular activities that get children to school every day. It gets them engaged.
No, it's the parents who should do that.
Well, they should, but they don't.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
I think the role of government is to provide for all of us a safe and stable environment where we can raise our families and live safely and happily, knowing that you are there to protect and provide for all of us.
Okay. Yes.
The role of government is to meet the expectations of the communities they serve.
Okay, now that's an interesting statement. Listen to what we're talking about today. Her comment was to...
Again, the role of government is to meet the expectation of the communities they serve.
Now, think about that. What are your expectations as a community? What constitutes the community? Where we're going to end up with, you're going to find this as we go along with our discussions. Charlotte O'Hara, who is a state representative, welcome.
My expectations is that we have a tax structure in place that's going to be attracting businesses that will come into the state of Kansas so that we can increase our employment, that will increase our tax base, that will provide us the revenue to fund the needs of the state. But if we don't have a tax structure in place, it's going to encourage businesses to locate here, and we are the high point on the prairie as far as taxes. In 1989, our gasoline taxes were 11 cents a gallon. They are now 24 cents a gallon. That just gives you an example. Our property taxes are high. Anyway, it's if we don't get our tax structure to a place that businesses are willing to come here and establish their businesses, and I mean for everyone. Don't pick and choose winners and losers with tax policies. Lower the rates for everyone so that we have an atmosphere that's going to really be conducive to grow our businesses.
But I think, talking about taxes, I think you would agree that taxes are how government functions. And so we're talking about how we raise them. That's a different issue than whether we should raise them.
Getting first things first on your list of priorities, I believe it would be first to take care of those who are hungry, those who don't have good schools, those who need medical care they're not getting, and I would place that somewhat above businesses being attracted. They have come, they are here, they're doing well. I think that's backwards.
Okay, there's a difference of opinion as to how businesses are doing and what's going on in our economy today. There are all kinds of ancillary questions that surround the whole idea of attracting business. You know, there's, on the one side, is our tax environment such that it discourages businesses from coming. But ask yourselves, too, if we encourage businesses to get here and they get here, they're going to be expecting certain things from us as well. One of those things is they need a job market. There has to be a workforce that is able to do it. One of the problems we have with the rural and smaller communities in our state is they don't have a workforce that will attract the businesses. And so that's a constant battle, the whole job thing that Jim was talking about. How do we increase the jobs and still encourage more attractiveness to these businesses to come here? How do you do that? Well, I've talked about, you've heard me talk about this before, talk about taxes. We've got 6.3 sales tax. Okay? But there's a way to do it. If we reduce the sales tax, we could reduce it down to about 3.8 or 4. But we have to spread the base. And you can't have all kinds of tax exemptions without narrowing the base. So, but people don't want to do that. And that's what I call a whole herd of sacred cows. You start talking about taking away people's exemptions, and you will have a whole line of people outside your door in Topeka talking, don't take mine. Don't tax me and don't tax he, tax the guy behind the tree. But what we need to do is we need to focus on how we can balance it. Again, balance is the key. What we're doing right now is we've got people that are way over here and saying, no taxes, no taxes, no taxes. We don't even want to talk about it. We've got people way over here saying, don't touch any of our programs. Don't deal with any of the things that we need. But we can't define the need. So we get back to what I just read to you. We have to define what the core is. And that's a major difficulty for those of us in the legislature. Every one of us, no matter where we are in particular positions. How do we define that core and address the will of the most people? We're never going to, what was it Roosevelt said, you're never going to please everybody all the time.
I think that goes back to what I was saying, encourage, participation from the public, make sure that those who use those services, make sure their voices are heard, not just a special interest group or make sure it does come down to John Doe on the street.
Okay, that's right.
One of the problems of relying on the people who are served is that the more we fund people who are not working and providing for their own funds, the larger that population becomes. Eventually, they outnumber those of us who are contributing our taxes to support them, and will continue to do so and eventually destroy the economic base of whatever unit we're talking about.
Right. Which is exactly the problem that we're all facing, I think, in all the states with regard to the retirement plans that we're looking at.
This lady over here mentioned, the people that need this and need that. I don't see, for the most part, that it is government's role to meet that need. It's up to us individually, especially if the tax situation was better, we'd attract all these good businesses to come in because of the tax structure, blah, blah, blah. We would have more money in our pockets as the taxpayers. Where do we go for more money? One thing, one of them said, I guess it was Jim, talked about the unemployment fund, but it wasn't a taxpayer issue. You're borrowing, what was it, $2 million a day, da-da-da. Bottom line is it is a taxpayer issue because when you borrow the money, it's the taxpayers, not the employee nor the employer, that will be picking up the slack. So it is a taxpayer issue. I'm sick to death of paying and paying and paying. I feed the birds in the winter. I established the bird welfare system. That's what it is.
And I'm sure they appreciate it.
They do. They love it. And the whole 9 yards.
They start fighting over the food.
They do. They do. But that's a good analogy to what we have created in our country. When you've got 50% or close to better than that of the people in this country that are receiving some type of government check, largesse, it isn't going to work. And it's a mindset, I believe, that has been put out there for us to accept and get used to, and we have. We love it, the tax exemptions, the, Medicare, Social Security, the whole 9 yards.
There's all paid into.
You get, yes, you pay into that and Medicare as well. but it's a drop in the bucket if you go anyway.
Well,
My point is, you can't be on the government dole all the time and expect others to pick up the slack for you.
we'll get back to that in just a second. Yes, sir.
On the subject of education, there's a key issue that a lot of people lose sight of. We compete in a global economy. Our federal government, despite some people's attitudes, has a pretty limited role in shaping education policy in this country. It's primarily the responsibility of the states. That is a different system than what we have, what we see in our competitors. We are competing against China, Japan, Brazil, Russia for manufacturing, for economic development. They have national educational policies. I'm not saying we should copy them, but what I am saying is that each of the 50 states has a responsibility under our system to maintain our technological edge if we are going to compete. And if Kansas says, well, we'll let California, New York, and Connecticut worry about it, we'll cut our taxes. Well, suppose California, New York, and Connecticut say the same thing. Where are we then?
I think that's a valid question. Let me, I don't know whether I've used this example before or not, but if I have, forgive me. But have I talked to you about the blue tag before? The blue tag? Okay, let me talk to you about the blue tag. When I lived in Okinawa for a while, when I first got there, I asked, my folks were stationed there, so I was a student. I was kind of a beach bum, actually, for the summer. While I was in college, I went over there. But I got out among the people, and I got to wander throughout the cities and whatnot and just observe, which was a great experience. I went home one day and I asked my mom, I said, well, I see these people wearing blue tags on their clothes. What's a blue tag? It was like those postal tags, that you see, like Best Buy, it's got that symbol. It was something like that, only it was a blue tag. Didn't have anything written on it, it was just a blue tag. She said, well, those are mentally ill people. Okinawa did not have the capacity to provide for its mentally ill. It didn't have the money or the space or the places to put their mentally ill. But they identified them as mentally ill and they required them to wear a blue tag. Now, I went to Eggs and Issues last year and I brought this up. But I also pointed out that, let's say it was a red tag. What could the red tag be? You're worried about the people that are being let go in the prisons. Red tag could be felons that we don't have room for. We don't have room for them because, why?
Tax cuts.
The state of Kansas closed 3 prisons. They actually closed 4 and reopened 1. But we don't have any bed space. One of the things we talk about with our fiscal impact studies in Judiciary Committee, in particular in the criminal areas, is what's the bed space impact? How many beds are you going to need in the next 20 years if you do this particular thing? If you're adding any beds, you got enough people in the legislature to say we won't vote for it. We're not going to add any bed space. If you don't add any bed space, you can't keep putting people in prison. And if you don't put people in prison, what do? You put the worst of the worst in there? Yeah. How long do you keep them? Forever. You can't do that unless it's a life sentence, and we don't have very many of those that are life sentences. So, we let them go and let them wear a red tag so we know they're felons and they're walking among us, but we don't have any room for them because we're not going to fund it. Again, public safety, funding public safety, responsibility of government. So we've got the mentally ill walking around with a blue tag because we don't have any facilities for them. The latest thing we're talking about is closing KNI, Kansas Neurological Institute. How many people in this room have ever been to KNI?
What is it?
Kansas Neurological Institute. It's where we put Neurological. Okay, I will tell you, I've represented people at KNI as an attorney. I was appointed to represent a number of folks there. The people that I was appointed to represent were all adult women who were all above the age of majority. Their mental acuity, every one of them, was between 0 and 6 months. 0 and 6 months. They were on a ward at KNI. Now the word is that, well, we can close KNI and save the money, and we'll move those most profoundly disabled to Parsons. Parsons is pretty full. But they're going to move them down. Parsons is a state hospital, another one. We've already closed Topeka State Hospital. Did that several years ago. We're talking about community-based facilities, which is a great sounding thing, but if you take these people who are 0 to 6 months, and we're talking people that are some of them are 40, 50 years old. You take those people and you put them in a community-based facility, or you say, well, we're going to send them home with their families. Families are no longer responsible for them if they are over the age of 18 in our state.
Well, why would the families, why would they send the K-9 in the first place?
Exactly. But many families can't deal with them. They just don't know how to deal with that kind of a situation.
Plus, if they're 40, their parents are 70.
Well, that's true. And so this is the kind of thing that we don't think about when we think about, well, we don't want to take care of those folks. But I'll tell you what, if you turn somebody out and look at our sex offender list, you want to hear people go bananas, talk about the registry. There's no concept in our society, unless you work with these situations, about the broad spectrum of the sex offender violators. When we hear about sex offender, when I say that right now, what's in your head? I'll bet you're thinking about sex predators, the worst of the worst. You're not talking about the 12 or 13 or 14-year-old in some kind of a situation where they probably didn't even know, half of them, what they were doing, but they committed an offense. And now they're on the sex offender registry for life. For life. So what I want you to understand about what I'm saying is that when we talk about what are the core responsibilities for government, these are some of the things that we're dealing with. And we have to balance that against this discussion about what we're doing with taxes. Now, I woke up about 3 weeks ago, I think it was 3 or 4 weeks ago, in the middle of the night. I'm getting about 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night now. But I woke up in the middle of the night, and you know what went on in my mind? Was this, you'll probably think I'm a nut, but how many of you remember those fans that the grandmas had on the back row that came from the funeral home? And, with a little wooden stick, and, everybody knows what they are. Well, they might have been, but I don't know about that. You know what? I don't know. But anyway, I thought about these fans. And those fans that I woke up and I thought about 2 of them. They were the shape of a human head. One of them was just the shape, and it had a big dollar sign on it. The other one had transferable faces on it. It had the disabled, it had the children, it had all these other people. There were people's faces that we needed to take care of in government. And I was standing there looking at those 2 fans. That is the debate that we're having. That is what we're wrestling with. Every one of us has to deal with that. And we may deal with it differently from our different perspectives. But that's what the legislature in every state is dealing with now. Now, from my perspective, if we do not move back to the middle, if we're only over here dealing only with the money, and forgetting the faces on the people that we as government are supposed to govern, we're not doing our job. But if we're only over here dealing with just the faces and forgetting that we have a financial impact and a financial obligation, we're not doing our job either. But what we have to do is find a way to balance those two and to pay for the core things that this organization, this was written by Jonathan Williams, who's the director of the Tax and Fiscal Policy Task Force, the American Legislative Exchange Council. He's the one that wrote this article, and he talks about priority-based budgeting. I believe in that. I think every one of us should believe in priority-based budgeting. The question we have is, what are the priorities? And unless we stop talking only about the money, we have lost our objective on the other priorities that we have an obligation to do. And that's what I am doing.
But when education takes up, including higher education, 67 cents of every dollar in the state of Kansas, you have to talk about the money sum. How do we get school districts to be accountable for the money that they are given by we, the taxpayers? They are not accountable for that money. Each and every year, they just get another check. Shawnee Mission School District had an $11 million surplus at the end of the year last year. By the time the school year started, they had a $3 million surplus. Look up the numbers. Administrators got a pay raise. How is it? They're going to fire teachers, but they're going to give administrators a pay raise. They need to be accountable for the money that we, the state taxpayers, give them. How do we do that on the state level?
Okay, let's talk about it. I agree. We need to hold everybody accountable. That's what I mean by responsible government. We need to look at that. Well, let me ask you this, just along that same line. I would challenge all of you, challenge my colleagues in the legislature, go look at the new people that have been hired in the various cabinets and look at what their salaries are compared to the ones that were just fired. They are higher by a long way. We just hired somebody for the Kansas Corporation Commission from Colorado. We've hired 2 people now, or 3 people, out of Florida for SRS. And they demanded a higher salary. Hi guys, he's fine. We need to be accountable all across the board. And I have no problem with looking at that. But I will tell you, somebody told me I should say however. After the last meeting, somebody said, "Get the butt out of your mouth," which was really graphic. But nonetheless, I think it was my wife that said that. Probably. She's good at that. But at any rate, however, the thing that we need to be careful of is that we start with the assumptions that everything is bad, everything is wrong. And it's not. And I will tell you.
I don't have that assumption. You know, my husband's a school teacher. My father-in-law taught school since the 1960s and as a retired school teacher. I do not think they're bad. We have a daughter who's probably going to end up being a teacher. At the same time, they need to be accountable, not the teachers, the administration, for the money that they're given. And they're not. And all of these other things, those faces you were talking about, we can't take care of them if all of the money in the state of Kansas, pretty much, once you add in Medicare, Medicaid, and schools, goes to those 3 programs.
And you remember what I said about the sacred cows? Let me throw this out. When I was in the military, and those of us who were in the military will remember this, every year we had to go to the firing range, fire our weapons, just to keep qualified. So we'd go out there and we'd be firing our weapons. And there was some sergeant running up and down the firing line when we got through at the end of our exercise. He'd say, "Fire up all the rest of your ammunition. We can't turn any in. Because if we turn it in, we won't get the same allocation next year."
Never happened when I was in.
Never happened?
Never happened to me on the range.
what, it happened to me, and I saw it happen a lot. I was in the military 26 years.
And that's not, you can't say that's from North, because it's not.
Were you a Marine?
I was in the Navy.
Oh, well. I was Army, what can I say?
They had the big guns.
Yeah, with those big guns, that's a little different. But I can tell you, I saw it happen a lot. So, but it's an analogy that if you don't use up your money, or if you don't have that rainy day fund, you might not have it next year. Now, it's, like I said before, it's the abuse that we need to curb. But it's the abuse on both sides. From our county here, education is primary. And when we start looking at the cuts that we're talking about, the constituencies that I hear from are really upset about that. The governor just, in his budget, in his rescission, $56 million.
But to be honest, Jim, most of them don't know that it's 67 cents of every dollar.
Yes, they do.
Yes.
They do. Believe me.
I disagree. When we were walking, they did not know.
Well, I'll tell you what, go to the meetings, go to the school board meetings, go to all those things, and you will hear them. They do know it's 67%. Yes, sir.
I want to change the subject a little bit.
Okay.
Let me first say I agree with you 100% in all that you said. Okay? And what I'm reaching to ask you about is whether or not there is not some hidden tax for Johnson County in some of the ideas that are being considered by the legislature. And what I want to talk about specifically is this community-based facility idea. For example, let's say that K&I gets closed. That means that there's an increase of work for Parsons. So some money's going to have to go to Parsons because K&I was closed. Okay? What if that is pushed further and a series of facilities are developed in the communities across the state? If those people are moved into Johnson County, for whatever reason, let's say K&I is closed, there's a dangerous mentally ill person at K&I, and I know for a fact that they are. And that person has to be moved to the Johnson County Jail because there is no other place, or to any other county jail. Would that not increase the tax money that we are using? Doesn't that become a subtle tax for us? And let me give you an example of something that is actually happening right now. If somebody is declared incompetent to stand trial in, say, Manhattan, Riley County, and the judge orders a competency evaluation, that person, according to SRS records, is going to have to sit in Riley County Jail for 70 days before Larned has a bed. And then they're moved there. Well, who pays for those 70 days? It's Riley County, not SRS. And isn't the same thing happening here? Aren't the citizens of Johnson County, in essence, being taxed for something? And could they be taxed again if the population has to increase?
Let me ask, do you mind me putting you on the spot, Frank?
No, go ahead.
Frank, what's the largest mental illness facility we have in Johnson County?
Johnson County Jail.
Is that county funded?
Yes, it is.
And how much state fund do you get?
No. Some federal.
I think that makes your point. And that could very well happen if you bring those people back, but they're limited on what they can do as far as putting them in the jail. We just had a bill just this last couple of weeks which identified that our law enforcement officers go out, and if they find somebody who's mentally ill, they want to be able to take them to the Johnson County Mental Health as opposed to taking them to the jail. The law enforcement doesn't want to be a mental illness facility. Unfortunately, the alternatives sometimes don't allow them any options. But they have to have committed a crime. in order to be put into the facility. But, you know, that's an issue. But I think you raise a good point about these people coming back. I don't know about a hidden tax. What it is an unfunded mandate. And that's what happens when we at the state require the locals to do a particular thing and then don't give them any money to support them to do it. Then it means that they raise the tax at the local level to be able to do it, or they don't raise the taxes at all and we end up, again, short on another level of government. I know you've had your hand up a lot.
There we go. Thank you. Two questions then. One's a comment, I guess, and a question. First comment, when you look at what government does, it really spends other people's money. And I look at your example of on the one fan you have a dollar sign, and on the other sign you have people. If I look at the federal government and what they've done over the last number of decades, but especially the last decade, if you look at the national debt, the recognized official national debt we have now, something like $14 trillion. If you divide our population head count into that, it comes to a per capita debt of about $50,000 per capita. Every man, woman, and child walking around. If you take the unfunded liability of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, it approaches $300,000 per capita. So you add that $300,000 to the $50,000, you have a $350,000 per capita debt. Now, sooner or later, our country's going to fail, any country's going to fail that has that kind of debt that is sourcing the funding of that debt outside the country. So when you hold up the dollar sign and say, yeah, but it's the people that's important, what damage happens to the population when this dollar sign gets out of control and beyond anybody's comprehension, and we go broke and we can't fund any of this stuff?
That's a good question, but don't misinterpret what I said. What I said was we got to be balanced. And we have too many people that only see the dollar sign and too many people that only see the other side without thinking about the financial impact.
Government at the federal level isn't balanced. And the state level
I'll tell you
is
what,
supposed to balance.
I represent, I'm at the state level.
I know.
Okay? There isn't a lot that I can do except vote. And I encourage everybody to do that. But I will tell you that, yes, those are issues that we need to deal with. There are other things that we need to deal with at the federal level that the state can't really do a whole lot about. And we've got several of them that have been on our plate at the legislature. Immigration is one of those issues. That is a federal issue. Now, there are lots of states that want to say something because they're mad as hell and they're not going to take it anymore. One thing I will not do is pass legislation that does nothing except to deceive the people. If we can't do anything about it, we should be sending it to the right place. And that is, we should be telling the federal government to do what they need to do. And that's what I think that the Attorney General has done with his lawsuit. I have no problem with that. But changing our state constitution and doing a bunch of other things, trying to make people think that we have done something that is going to make a difference, is disingenuous, and I will not participate in that.
I have a second one.
Okay, one more.
All right. I know you teach at the Johnson County Junior College in government. You're a practicing attorney. You've been in public service for many, many years.
April 11th, it'll be 30 years.
Okay. My point is this. I'm kind of curious. As I understand it, the legislative process, somebody writes a bill, and then it gets allocated to a committee, and then the committee takes up that subject, discusses it, has hearings, all this stuff, and then they vote to either let it out of committee and let it go to the floor for further debate and voting, or they bottle it up and say we won't approve it. My question is the role of the chairman. Does the chairman by law have the authority to not even let the bill get to his committee or not?
Not to not get to your committee. It's assigned to the committee by leadership. But to not let it get out or to decide what to do with it, to not work it. Yeah.
Work it, make you call it.
Yeah, here's the process. It's assigned by leadership to a committee. It goes to the committee chair. The committee chair then schedules it in an agenda. The committee chair has absolute authority on when and how to set that. And you do. It's a two-step process. You hear the bill. When you have a hearing on the bill, that's when the public talks to you about it. Comes in, you have presentation, you listen to the public. When you work the bill, that's when the committee discusses what they've heard. In my committee, I rarely work a bill on the same day that we have a hearing. And the reason for that is, if you're doing that, a lot of people are going to say, well, you had your mind made up already and you didn't even think about what we said. So I wait at least a day, sometimes more, until we work the bill so that the committee has time to think about what the people have said that have come in. But then, once it's worked, the committee votes on whether to pass it favorable or not. If they say no, then it stays in the committee. If it's a carryover year, it can just sit there. It can be reconsidered at any time, but it just sits there. If they say yes, it might be amended by the committee, and then it's passed out on the floor. It's either be passed as the bill came, or be passed as amended, as the committee might amend it. That's sent out to the floor, and then the floor picks it up from there on general orders.
I'm here to get an answer to an email I sent to you, and you told me to come here. You did not answer my question.
Okay, well, just a minute. Let me call on you just a second. I've got two other people that have had their hands up.
I'd like to go back to this gentleman's comment. The problem with bureaucracies in general is that they do not add to the gross national product. And the GNP is the only thing that improves the living standard for all of us. Pass-throughs, and that's what this is involved with. The money goes up to the state and then right back to the local government, if it comes back at all. So the assignment of taking care of an issue passes to the local level in the case of the mentally ill, with or without the funds. But whether it is with the funds, it always involves a pass-through cost, sort of like wheelage on water. We have the same problem with the national government. They collect money from the states and then they parcel it out with a reduction made for the people in Washington who are earning fantastic salaries at our expense. I don't know what we can do about it, but one suggestion is that we have a lot of states who are involved in protesting at the local level what the federal government is doing, and there are probably enough of them to meet together and form some sort of constitutional change.
The constitutional change would be at the federal level.
Yes, but what I'm saying is the states are beginning to see the light of day in wanting to control the federal government, and maybe it's about time they did it.
Sure, and I have no problem with the debate. It's just how they go about
doing it. When
it.
they usurp power, do not stand for the usurpation, but amend the Constitution. And here we are allowing them to get away with it, and we allow the state to get away with it to a certain extent too, but with this pass-through charge.
I have a question. Representative Denning, you talked a little bit about job-creating bills, and I was wondering how we might be holding those businesses accountable for actually creating jobs through those bills you talked about.
Those two particular bills I did talk about, they have been in existence and they are held accountable. Both of them have to do with bringing in new jobs that did not exist before. And the Revenue Department produces a report back to the legislature every year on how many jobs they brought in and if they're still eligible for the tax credit. So,
is there like how many jobs they have to create in order to have that?
Yeah, and I wish I knew the answer. I think peak is, maybe Dolores could help me, it was 10, but I think we raised it to 25 new jobs.
No, the new jobs were relative to the salary that they were going to be.
Well, the salary had to be above, at least equal to or above the county average wage base.
And then last year it went down to the median, which is lower considerably. And those income taxes that are withheld from those people earning that salary stay with the employer.
Right.
So that is a tax incentive for the employer. And the state does not get that income tax money, except for 5% so that they can process a W-2. So when you file your tax, when the employee files their tax, they will have said, we paid this much Kansas withholding tax.
And the idea is to bring in new jobs that weren't here before, that shop at the grocery store, go to the dry cleaners, and so forth.
Well, I mean, if they don't move to this community, I mean, if they come from Kansas City, Missouri, it's likely they're not going to move their residence and then grocery shop here or go to the dry cleaners here. I mean, I certainly wouldn't move my residence just because my business moved right across the state line. And are you saying that this is the income tax that's being withheld from these employees' checks, and rather than it going to the general fund to pay for the things like education, it's going to pay to move these businesses across the state line?
That is correct, and the Overland Park Chamber is an enormous supporter of it, and they put pressure on the legislators every year to keep that credit in place.
But I've heard something about you are considering reducing the tax on business each year a little bit until down to nothing.
Not down to nothing, but the C Corp tax, the bill is Senate Bill 1, and it probably won't get out of the Senate, so it probably won't happen. But the idea was to reduce the corporate tax on C corporations from 7% to 3.5%.
And further down, or just to
No, that was the floor. Initially, it was to go to 0, but Representative Brown put an amendment on it not to allow it to go to 0 because we looked at it as a rainy day fund.
Jim, can you explain to me what a C
C Corp
Corp is?
is it's a design of a business that pays 35% tax, flat 35% tax. That's a C Corp.
What about personal income tax, though?
Personal income tax is around 7% to the state, 35% to the federal government. That's a C Corp.
But isn't personal supposed to be reduced to 0 in that tax plan?
Yeah, the personal tax is, we say it's a march to 0, but, it probably would take 10, 15 years to get there because it's all based on growth.
And what is the advantage of that?
Well, the idea is if we have less taxes, there's more money into the economy, that you hire more employees, they buy more GNP that was mentioned earlier, and it brings the whole entire tax base up. So, it's the exact opposite of Keynesian economics. Keynesian economics is, I think if the government spends $1, it's supposed to generate $1.75% in economic growth. Half the folks believe in it, half the folks don't. This is the other half.
Thank you.
I'd like to follow up on something this gentleman up front said. It's my understanding from what I've read on various blogs and emails that there has been, maybe you can tell me how many bills have come over to the Senate from the House Judiciary and the House Corrections Committee that have been at hearings, and how many of those have been worked? Do you have any idea?
This is the list of all the bills that I've had in my committee, and it includes all the ones that came over from the House.
Didn't you say 80 or something?
There are approximately 40 that came over. There's only been, there are 2 or 3 that were referred over to, I sent one to the Judicial Council, which is for us, it's a freebie because we send it over and they analyze the bill to see what their thoughts are. This is a carryover year, which means the bills don't die at the end of the year. They go over to next year. So we have that luxury. There were a couple that we
referred to interim study. One was the liability for medical expenses to persons in custody of law enforcement. We don't have very many that have been sent to interim. And there's only been 3 bills that I didn't work at all. And they all related to the same thing. And that's probably what your question is.
One more.
You did say,
The other one had to do with education, basically responsibility of the school districts. And I was told, this is back, I don't know how many years ago it was billed, probably 8, 9 years ago, for me to take a little drive out in the county, and I did. And when I grew up here in the county, born and raised here, I went to Shawnee Mission Northwest High School. Every high school had a practice football field. Well, I was told if you were to drive by, again, this was like 7 or 8 years ago, Olathe Northwest High School, and I did, they had 3 practice football fields. Isn't that a waste of money? You know, that money could have gone into the classrooms. Why does one high school, when every high school had the practice football field, why does one high school have to have 3? The money wasted for that land, the upkeep and all that, just, to me, that's irresponsibility.
You know what, I don't disagree with you. And I think that's something that should be taken up with the school administration. I will tell you that I've been looking into several things that I've been hearing about. I'm very supportive of education. I'm not supportive of the abuses. That's the question. What are abuses? But there are all kinds of questions that I have about why, and this will probably get me in hot water with Shawnee Mission, but why do every one of our school districts have an independence about what they do with regard to anything they want to do with regard to the times when they start, how many teacher days that they've got, all kinds of things. It's an independent, local kind of directive that goes to the specific school district. I've had several people just this last week who called to complain because the school districts in our general area here don't all have the same spring break. And you get families, you get split families that, you know, well, gee, I can't do this because the kids are on spring break then, and all of those kinds of things. Admittedly, I'm old military, so I like uniformity a little bit more than some of these folks do. I don't know why we start and finish our school years at different dates in different school districts. And so there's lots of questions that I've gotten in that regard, and I think your question is a very valid one. It should be posed to that specific school to find out, why did you do that? And I don't know.
You have to understand that building and operations are statutorily completely separate budgets. Sure. And we can have independent local elections to raise bond issues, which Olathe did for their facilities. In the support of their patrons, went out and voted and said, we want these facilities. That money cannot be spent for teacher salaries or for anything classroom. They're completely separate budgets.
That is true. But I think we need to examine a lot of those things. Now, Nancy,
okay.
What's your question?
On the 12th of March, I sent you an email and inquired as to why you were refusing to hold hearings on House Bill 2101, which dealt with the method of selecting our appellate judges. And I gave rationale, blah, blah, blah. They replied back. They said, for all intents and purposes, there weren't any hearings scheduled. You were in charge because it went to your committee. You could have done so. But it was still alive. I don't know in what way, but I'd like to know why. I guess it kind of goes back a little bit to his question. You teach this government course at JUCO, and do you have total dictatorial authority when a bill comes from the House, regardless of whether you agree with it or not, to decide as chairman of your committee, I will not hear the bill. I'm not even going to look at it. My issue is whether you or anybody else as chairman of the committee likes a particular bill, you have the hearing on it, let the chips fall where they may.
The answer to your question is yes. I have absolute authority to decide. Now, I will tell you that in the 3 years I've been chair of judiciary, this is the first time I've just absolutely refused to hear a bill.
You blocked last session, was it not the healthcare freedom amendment?
No, I didn't block it. It didn't have time.
No, that was.
Sure, I mean, you can assume anything you want. But I will tell you that there are, when you have the kind of committee that I've got, and you've been there before, I have 80 bills. I have 1 hour a day, 5 days a week. For us to have any kind of time for anybody to talk about it, I think anybody that attends my committees will tell you that we push them through pretty darn good. And I will tell you that, but this one, with regard to judicial, I will tell you, I'm absolutely, vehemently opposed to the change that has been proposed by the governor. And I will tell you that for one person to make a decision on who they want to be a judge without any open consideration whatsoever, and have that one person then send it on to a committee.
Elected body.
Send it on to a committee that I'm a member of the confirmation committee in the Senate. Rarely do we have anybody who is not confirmed. Rarely. In fact, in the 3 years I've been on that committee, we haven't not confirmed anybody. When you have that kind of power to appoint somebody that you believe, and it can be anybody the governor wants to appoint as long as they meet the basic requirements, as opposed to a committee that is made up of 4 members that are appointed by the governor, 1 from each of the congressional districts, and 5 members that are elected by the bar. And they go through the kind of scrutiny that they go through, and believe me, the form that you have to fill out is a very thick, very composite thing that it's amazing what they look for. In fact, I looked at it, and that document requires more than I had to go through to get a security clearance in the military. It's a very, very comprehensive document that they look at. Anybody in the bar who has the qualifications can apply, and they do. They apply and go before this committee, and the committee meets with them, and contrary to what you may have heard, it is a public hearing. Anybody can go and sit in on those public hearings. Oh, but I've heard from people who have said, no, you can't, but you can. Very open, very above board interviews. And that committee makes a decision on 3 people. And they send them forward to the governor, for the governor to select one of those 3. It's worked that way for over 50 years. And it's worked very well. And you may not like the results of some decisions that courts have made. I can tell you that there's never a decision made in any court that there isn't somebody who doesn't like the result.
Oh, yeah.
But I will tell you that our system is by far better than the one that's been proposed. And they may find a way to go around me, but I will tell you, as long as I am there, that will not go through me. It can go around me, but it will not go through me because I think it is so wrong. And here's another part of that reason. I believe very strongly in the separation of powers. And you've seen me do this before. I have the Constitution in my pocket all the time. I believe very strongly in the independence of the judiciary. Absolute independence of the judiciary. Can we rid it of all politics? No. You can't do that. The people can go and they can vote judges out. Do they? Normally not. Normally the judges are retained between 60 and 80%. But that's the people speaking. But I will not allow that to be politicized to the point that we have judges that are going to be chosen for a specific small political ideology so that they can change the outcome of the court hearings.
It's already.
I don't think it
I
is.
frankly want to elect them.
Well,
It's out in the open, it's political, yes, but there's politics currently with this current system, the Missouri one.
Well, you asked why I did it, and that's why.
I appreciate it. You could have saved yourself a lot of trouble if you just replied the same thing. You didn't answer my question. You said, come to my meeting.
You know why?
I'm here.
Because there were a lot of other people that had questions about it, and this is a way for me to answer it for everybody. Instead of right now I have 502 emails I haven't got to answer yet.
I'm in worse shape than you are.
And I got on my computer this morning before I came here, and it was down, so I don't know how many are going to be unloading on it while I'm here. But I get hundreds and hundreds of emails, and I too try to get back to them, but if I can answer that question in groups, it's
I do appreciate
better.
you responding. I mean, like the next
Yes,
day.
I respond as soon as I possibly can.
I would just let you know, I would disagree with you on one aspect of that. If you will look at the political contributions of the judges that are on the bench right now before they were judges, if you look at the political contributions of the committee that selects the judges, and this is both on the state level and on the county level, they have a political agenda because they're literally 98% Democrat, they're 98%, the money that goes to them goes to Democratic candidates. They have a political, check it out, I've checked it out. I'm the one who led the effort in Johnson County, I know.
Okay.
I'd like to change tune a little bit, and I probably need to reintroduce myself. My name is Patty Mack, and I'm the Northwest Area Representative on the Shawnee Mission School District right now. I wanted to answer your question. I'm not sure if this is the right forum or not, but if you'd like to answer your question.
It's an open forum.
Okay. I'd like to answer your question on the schedule, if you'd like.
Sure.
First of all, it's a local control issue.
It is, you're right.
And it's not necessarily that Blue Valley, Olathe, Shawnee Mission, and DeSoto are on the same schedule. But as far as in the Shawnee Mission School District, our spring break is pretty much the same week. It's that it's always over St. Patrick's Day and my anniversary. So I know exactly what week it's going to be. Actually, KU and K-State this year were a week later. Last year, they were the same week.
And last year, everybody told me that
it was just fine.
It had to be with KU's.
Yeah.
And as a K-Stater, that was tough to take.
Well, it's during March Madness. During March Madness, it's, that way anyway. As far as the early dismissal and the late starts, the reason why we have that is so that teachers can collaborate. And I've got a bunch of teachers over here. We have had to cut resource teachers in the Shawnee Mission School. We've had to make a lot of cuts. And I would love to meet with you later. If you know where there's $11 million, I would love to know where that is because I would love that because I am so sick of cutting budgets, I can't even see straight. That'd be great.
So that's another value of these forums.
That's great because I would love to know where that is because we have budget workshops in the Shawnee Mission School District. Our books are open and nobody comes to our budget workshops. I can tell you that for a matter of fact. Kathy Cook does come. Our
Kathy
books
comes to every meeting.
She does. She does. However, the reason why we have early dismissals and late starts is so those resource teachers can meet with our teachers. They go to different buildings. Let's say, I'll just use PE as an example, and I think you'll agree with me, Greg, is that you get all the PE teachers from all the high schools together at a certain high school on an early release day. They all meet at 2 o'clock at Shawnee Mission West. And then they'll go through the new curriculum or they'll, whatever. So you have to have those collaborative time periods built into the school day. So that's why we have late arrival or early dismissals. I am happy to report, though, this year we are not going to have any more for the rest of the year. So we don't have to make up for those 2 extra snow days. So the calendar will stay the same. And since I've been on the board, I've been able to be a part of this decision to not have the Shawnee Mission School calendar go later than Memorial Day. And I'm very proud of that because it felt like a hanging chad there. You'd go 1 or 2 days after Memorial Day and you're going, why? But I
I am also proud of Shawnee Mission in the fact that we do go more hours per day than a lot of other school districts. And our numbers, the quality of the education that we're giving our children, the results that we're showing, even in budget cuts. I mean, it's a push-pull thing. We are losing money, and it's supposed to be that your results are supposed to go down. You guys, ours are holding strong and going up, especially with our children that need the extra special care. Our ELL students, our numbers, if you go to the meetings and you listen to the board report, or you can go to smsd.org, if you look at our results, the results are still going up. So please take that time. We're doing our very best. Our teachers are overburdened. They're having larger classrooms. They're doing a lot more with a lot less. So
thank you for that input. Joan?
I'd just like to jump in on that. I'm Joan Levins, and I'm running for the at-large seat in Shawnee Mission. And in response to the Olathe observation about the improved athletic field or the triple athletic practice fields, often those are booster clubs in the school districts that are funding some of those extras in athletics. Those are not, I know that's true for Shawnee Mission. We have some improved facilities because the parents feel so strongly about it that they have gone out and they're selling fertilizer right now out in a parking lot at a high school in order to raise the money to do these extra things.
I like the trash bags.
Right. But I think before we accuse our schools, our school districts of spending this money, our community is so frustrated. I'm going to get passionate here, but our community is so frustrated that we can't support our teachers in the way they deserve to be supported because they are the front line. We cannot get the resources in our classrooms. We cannot reduce class size, which is the #1 indicator of an excellent education and an excellent outcome. And so we are out there doing it ourselves.
There's no data to support that.
Where's your data for
There's no data to support that.
I'm Charlie Rogers. It's my turn. I'm not running for anything, but I have a question about this idea of things I've heard that our education governor is wanting to appoint the school board, the state school board, and wipe that out and just have one person. Have you heard anything about that? And if so, is there some way to stop that?
I don't think we have an ERO that I've seen where he's going to do that. He has talked about whether or not it would be appropriate. I will tell you that the current administration came in with looking at external resources and what I call the next tier out of organizations, such as the Arts Commission and the Parole Board and some of these others that are out there, to pull them under the cabinet level positions. And I've heard the discussion, I've heard the rumors, but that's all they are at this point. Have any of you talked?
Number one, that's not true. That was not the governor's idea. That was Speaker Mike O'Neill's bill that he introduced into the House Education Committee. Now, Speaker O'Neill introduced that. We had a hearing on it. The bill has not been worked. It will not be worked. It's still alive. However, it was Speaker O'Neill's intent that it began conversation about the function and the role of state board, the regions, how we can work together if we're working together well. It was designed to start a conversation. It was not designed to change the law. So really, it's important that I've heard lots of rumors. I read an article that was in I do believe it was the Star, I saw it online, that had a lot of untruths. It had a lot of speculative things. It also talked about a lot of bills that were introduced but were never worked. Bills that were introduced that didn't even have a hearing because the proposal was something that no one even wanted to address. One of them was charging back the local school districts when a child had to have remedial classes in college. That did not even get into committee, in the education committee. We actually rejected the idea. So that bill was then taken to the education budget committee and introduced there, and they accepted it. I do not believe that they had a hearing on it. So in this article that I read, there was at least 3 fallacies that that were included in that article, but they were included as fact. So you read something, but that does not make it true. So asking questions is really important to find out what is actually happening and what is really not, because there's a lot of rumors about things that are happening that, frankly, they're not. So I hope that answered that question, but it is not the governor's plan. It was Speaker O'Neill's idea. However, there was not one person that voted to make that out of committee. Okay?
Okay. And one other thing.
I just want to support that, and I want you to understand, Amanda's absolutely right. Just because you read it, it doesn't matter what publication you may read it in. And you know, it isn't just the Star. You can go to Topeka, the Capital Journal. You can go to all kinds of newspapers, and we have a lot of press people that are in the Capitol all the time. But just because you read it, don't necessarily assume it's fact, because it may not be. And it's amazing. I find out things that I've done that gee, I didn't.
Okay, Tim, on one other thing, on the size of the classroom, I've had over 40 years in high school and junior high classrooms, and believe me, I've been in classes where I've had to teach over 40 kids, and I've been in classes where I've had 12, and there's a hell of a difference. And if you don't believe it, I would say get your butt out and go volunteer at school. I volunteer at 2 grade schools, and I substitute teach yet. And I see these things, and it's getting worse and worse. And yes, a teacher should be able to control the class, but when you've got 40 kids, you spend half your time disciplining and controlling people, and you don't get much done, because go to McDonald's and watch a family of 3 kids where the parents can't even control their own 3 kids in a restaurant, and you want a teacher to control 40 different kids. So don't tell me about class size.
You had a comment you wanted to make.
Well, I wanted to talk about when we were talking about the tax issue and business, I think it's really important to understand that we compete with 49 other states for jobs here. And there's a reason why in the last year Texas had more job growth than the other 49 states combined. And it's not because of the weather. They're a low tax state, and I can tell you, I get calls once a week from their economic development people trying to encourage me to move my business to Texas. If they're calling me, they're calling every other successful business in this community. And you have to understand that most businesses are going to go where they're attracted to. And if it's in their financial best interest to be there, they will be. So be careful about penalizing business, because they are the ones that create the jobs, that employ the people, that pay the taxes, that allow us to be able to have all these things that we want to have, including education.
And their state ranks 48th or 49th nationally as far as quality of schools.
That was what I was going to say. Would you take your family down there?
Based on the size of the state.
Per capita.
Per capita. Earl?
Leadership is a lonely job. And with it comes responsibility as well as authority. Now, I'm in the back of the tax issue as far as you people in front line of the legislature. I'm aware of a bill that was a compromise, not what I wanted, but it was close to it. It was on the road to being a bill that could have been worked and over a number of years and been successful to do what he says. And that is to start taking the income, move the income source to broad-based tax, to consumption tax. Pay that slightly, start working down the tax rate for individuals and corporations. Now, I'm of the opinion that those compromises have been worked out satisfactory to the House, the Senate, and the governor's office. And then all of a sudden, the President and the Senate decided it had been materially changed and just scuttled it to the podium. Can you tell me why?
No.
Okay. There's a question, then you should be answering.
I will ask you. I don't recall why I'm not on the tax committee. Right. I do know the bill you're talking about, and I will find out, and I'll let you know. I know your number.
Just want to ask, as committees or individual legislators
how we do. I think as a general rule, the legislature makes a very concerted effort to try to do that. Part of the difficulties we run into, I told you how many I've got. I'll tell you, don't brag just back like old Grandpappy Amos used to say on TV, for those of you who remember black and white TV. I had 80 bills. I told you how many days I had to work. To give you an example of a comparison, local government on our side of the building had 4 bills. Now, we get them worked or heard as much as we can. And I work as many as I possibly can, with that one exception. And that's the exception maybe that proves the rule. I've always said that every bill is important to somebody. This one is so egregious I cannot do it in good conscience.
In yours, is that because
yes,
you're an
it is in my opinion.
Right, because that's the way we do it federally. That is the way we select judges federally.
Well, look what kind of process that is. How many have been appointed?
We're the only state that does it this way. Out of all 50 states.
We are not the only state.
We are not the only state that gives this much power to the bar.
The lawyers have a majority.
We are not the only state. Okay.
Doesn't matter.
We agree to disagree. Okay.
I'll give you the factual data to show you how every other state does it. This is the only state that gives this much power to the bar. And that's analogous to asking for the utility companies to select their own EPA inspectors.
Is there another one somebody wants to?
Can we hear from Greg on this? Because he does have a different opinion.
Kansas is the only state that does it this way, Senator.
Missouri doesn't.
No.
And you need to stand up to that fact. Why don't you let these people know that you're one of the people that gets to elect those people that get to be on that committee?
Excuse me, I'm an attorney.
Only lawyers get to do that.
I'm
No
an
one else
attorney
in the
in the state
state.
of Missouri, and that's how they do it in Missouri.
The bar doesn't do it.
They do not.
The bar has a committee that they do.
No, Kansas is the only
They do
state
not
I can
have
show
a
you the
majority
data.
control in
Why
Missouri.
do you think it's called the Missouri Plan?
It's a modified version of
Okay.
Missouri.
This is a point that we're going to have to agree to disagree. And I will tell you that rarely have I taken such a firm stand. And I will tell you how strongly I feel about this. You know how I feel about the DUI bill that I chaired for 2 years and spent 5 years working? I would give that up before I would give up this bill. I will not change my position on this issue. It is that critical to our society.
Thank you.
Lawyers don't want to give up their power.
You know what? I sat for 7 years. The people have had a say.
No, they have no skin in the game on this. But
Okay, I know your position. I know the position of Greg's. I know the position of you that oppose it. I disagree very strongly. And I happen to be the chair of the committee that has the ability to not hear it. This is the one time I will not hear it. I spent 10 years in the legislature, and I had many times where bills that I really wanted were held up by chairs. I didn't do that until now, 10 years later. So you know how strongly I feel about this. And that's just where it's going to be. Now, they may go around me. Senate Bill 83 is coming up on Monday. It's got that bill in it. Now, if there's a concur or non-concur, we'll see what happens.
in their elections, you know.
That's right. That's fine. Bring them on.
That's how it works.
Yeah, I went to the same program down in Olathe, the Southern Johnson County Republicans or something like that some of these people went to, and the quote about 98% of the judges giving to Democrats was incorrect. The majority of those who give anything gave to Democrats, but almost half of the judges didn't give anything. And I think if we're going to quote from that individual studies with whom I've corresponded by email, we need to quote them correctly. The thing that distinguishes Kansas is that the bar has apparently the majority of people on the board. There are many other states that use this same type of plan. So if you want to compromise, let's remove one bar member. Not make it a political process to appoint these judges. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, and
and look at this objectively and try to come to some kind of compromise.
And I will tell you the judges would probably agree with that. So we'll look at it. But anyway, Martha.
You're right.
I'm out of time. She takes care of me. So one more question. And we'll,
Mike has a comment and something that's happened over the last year, and I think that teachers get so passionate about is that the cuts we're talking about in the state are hurting the most vulnerable. It's the most vulnerable that all of the cuts, and with kids, and maybe the mentally ill, maybe the disabled, you're hurting the most vulnerable of ours. And I think our kids are our future, and I think that the tax, it needs to be fixed. The funding needs to be fixed. It doesn't need to be cut. I think there's a lot of people that believe that education gets too much money. And I can tell you that when the lawsuit that went through a few years ago and increased funding to education, there were a lot of good things put in place with that money, with tutoring programs, lowering class sizes, to meet all the needs of those kids. And now that's all being taken away. And it's really hard as a teacher to see that happen, because you know that's not what gets good for our kids. So I think we've lost sight of that, and I think that really is important.
okay, well with that, I want to thank my colleagues for being here and for your participation and comments. And I want to thank all of you for being here. Regardless of your side or your opinions, I appreciate you being here because this is the kind of dialogue that does make a difference. So thank you all very much, and